Let me bring in another one of my old pals who joins us via Skype from the banks of the Potomac. That would be Craig Shirley. Craig's a New York Times best-selling author, presidential historian, and Reagan biographer, and he's the author of a brand new book, soon to be released. Love the title of this, Reagan Rising: The Decisive Years, 1976 through 1980. Interesting, Craig, you call them decisive years. And in the vernacular of Hollywood and broadcasting, we'd call them years on the beach, because
Yes.
Mr. Reagan was no longer governor of California. He had lost the nomination to Jerry Ford. Let me just ask you, given the experience that Reagan had both in and out of office, what do you think his advice would be today to Donald Trump?
I would think he would say what he did himself was to ignore the cacophony, ignore the insiders, ignore the Washington parlor game, the New York parlor game, and focus on the people. Reagan drew his strength and sustenance from the American people, which is why he spent so much time meeting with them and talking with them, reading their letters, having various interviews and things like that. So Reagan knew that there'd been a disconnect in this country since the time of Jefferson, that there were the insulated elites who viewed the world one way, and there was the rest of the world which viewed in a more common sense manner. I would ignore the stuff about Russia. I would ignore the stuff about fake news. I would ignore all the excuses. And by the way, speaking of, if the Russians, I don't understand, maybe you can answer this for me, JD, is that if the Russians stole this election, how come Hillary won the popular vote by 2.5 million votes? I mean, if they're going to steal it, they're not very good criminals. They're kind of Keystone cops, aren't they?
Well, you would think so, but I'm sure the Clinton people or the left would say, now, wait a minute. Although here's the irony, Craig. Say, do you think the Russians are crazy? They understand our Constitution. They understand the Electoral College. But that, of course, would destroy their argument. They couldn't go either way with it, Craig, which shows your value not only as a historian, but as a campaign consultant and a guy who deals in public relations. You have set up the perfect question to use on the left with all these intimations about Russian involvement. And for that, sir, I salute you. A very practical question. I don't think they could wiggle out of it, no matter how sympathetic the Washington Post, New York Times, and the Alphabet networks might